So I occasionally bring a story to the table that Eric reminds me he's never heard before.
This is one of those.
Now, I've heard this story multiple times. I've read about it in different places. And probably I won't say one of my favorite stories, but I do enjoy it a great bit. But it is the story of the anesthetic prowler, the phantom anesthetist, or, more commonly known, the Mad Gasser of Mattoon. Gotta love that name.
Yeah. Rolls off the tongue nicely.
From a child born into this world, we are taught what to believe. Closed-minded we become, fearful to be deceived. Still we desire to know what lies beyond that locked door. The art of the storyteller, conjuring tales of legend and lore. History hidden, lost knowledge, things forgotten and the unknown. These are the things that direct us and will set the tone. Welcome, friends, to another episode of Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
So the Mad Gasser of Mattoon, he's kind of a strange character. The modern descriptions of the Mad Gasser are based on the testimony of Mr. and Mrs. Bert Kearney, victims of the first Mad Gasser case reported by the media. And people describe the Gasser as being a tall, thin man dressed in dark clothing wearing a tight-fitting cap. Now, a later report described the Gasser as being a woman dressed as a man.
Read that, yeah.
Now, he's been described as carrying what they call flit gun. Now, if you don't know what a flit gun is, you've probably seen it in the old Tom and Jerry cartoons. But is that weird little pump handle sprayer that you pump the back of it and it sprays gas out? Of course, the Mad Gasser used this to expel gas into the homes of the people he was, I don't want to say attacking. Attacking doesn't seem like the right word.
These poor slumbering victims.
Yeah, he was harassing people.
Kind of a peeping Tom kind of aspect, but with side effects.
Now, rumors of the time wanted to say the Gasser was all sorts of things, from an escapee from a mental asylum, or maybe a German spy testing out a new form of poisonous gas.
Nazi.
Or maybe even some sort of extraterrestrial visitor here to knock us out and abduct us, and
who just ate at Taco Bell before he visited people.
Oh, what's the old joke? I just went to Taco Bell. Well, what'd you get? Diarrhea, the same as always?
No, Taco Bell does not sponsor our broadcast.
I like Taco Bell.
I do,
so
too.
I shouldn't make that joke. So, but Eric, you said you'd never heard of the Mad Gasser when I brought this up to you.
No, I dove in and did some research, and of course we're referring to Mattoon, Illinois, a small town of about 17,000, and this all occurred over a period of about 2 weeks. Now, I did find, you had said the Kearney family actually was the first one picked up publicly, which it was.
That was the first one publicized. There was a case before that, actually. Now, of course, we talk about the Mad Gasser, and this is the name given to the person or people believed to be responsible. Like Eric said, this was Mattoon, Illinois, and this all happened for a couple weeks in the mid-40s.
And the local newspapers who actually give him this alluded name.
And they didn't even pick up on the first case, which we'll get to in a moment. But there were more than 24 cases reported to police over the span of 2 weeks, as well as many more reported sightings of a suspect that could be the Mad Gasser. Now, most cases are kind of similar, but overall, victims reported smelling strange odors in their homes, soon followed by symptoms including paralysis of the legs, coughing, nausea, vomiting, and some even reported spitting up blood. So very serious. Victims made quick recoveries, however, and none suffered any long-term effects.
Usually within like as little as 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, very quick recoveries.
No deaths or serious medical consequences were related to any of the Mad Gasser attacks. Now, almost no physical evidence was ever found.
Right.
And in some cases, the explanation was obvious. I believe some of them were cases of spilled nail polish, odors from animals, and then odors from local factories. I think they had a diesel engine plant in town that would occasionally,
I actually read where it had been labeled as a war plant.
Yeah.
I'm assuming building diesel, vehicles and stuff.
And I guess if the wind blew the right direction, which, factories have their own smell.
Now, you said a little physical evidence. Every now and then, a footprint or two.
So, and I think we'll touch on those in the individual situations. Now, the attacks now are widely considered to be a case of mass hysteria, although there are others who maintain that the Mad Gasser actually existed, or that the attacks have another explanation such as industrial pollution. Now, as far as the identity of the Mad Gasser, I think at the end, we have a potential suspect I'm going to talk about.
Ooh.
And only just recently has this gentleman been named. But, however, we want to get into the actual attacks. Now, the first one that was documented was that of the Kearneys on September 1st.
1944.
However, there was a case before that.
Yes, August 31st, 1944, a Mr. and Mrs. Irvin Rafe were asleep in bed. Mr. Rafe awoke to smell something that he described thinking possibly as the pilot light on the stove might not be functioning properly.
And if anybody has gas furnace, stove, or whatever, you've probably smelled that,
Yes,
that propane
it's
smell.
a very distinct smell. So he gets up out of bed and he goes obviously to go check it out. He's left his wife there in bed. Now he returns back to the bedroom and he didn't find anything. Everything with the gas stove seemed to be in perfect working condition. But he did say he suddenly felt violently nauseous, was the words that was used. And he found his wife partially paralyzed, unable to move her legs. Now, later that morning, the neighbor's daughter reported that she also woke up with a similar paralyzation with reference to these gas smells. These would be the technical first, events of several over the next couple weeks.
Now, the first documented by the media was the next day, September 1st. Now, all these events happen at night, of course. We say the
seem
next
to be
day,
from 10 p.m. to early morning before sunrise.
But Mrs. Kearney reported smelling a strong, sweet odor in her home around 11 p.m. Now, at first, she ignored it, thinking it might be the flowers outside her window. But as the odor becomes stronger, she noticed that she began to lose feeling in her legs.
Now, you mentioned sweet smelling, and we mentioned the smell of a pilot light.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about you. I don't relate the pilot light smell to a sweet.
Now, well, again, you're trying to identify a strange smell, maybe. Yeah, I agree with you. I wouldn't compare the two and say it was sweet, but
pungent, not a flowery smell.
A lot of people described it as sort of a cheap perfume.
Yeah,
so.
Okay.
But anyway, she began to lose feeling in her legs, and she panicked. She called out to her sister, Mrs. Reddy, who was there in the house at the time, and she also noticed the smell and figured it had to be coming through the open bedroom window, but they found no evidence of a prowler. Now, Bert Kearney, Mrs. Kearney's husband, was a local taxi driver, so that's why he's not home at the time, but he returns home to find an unidentified man hiding close to one of the windows. Now, the man fled instantly as soon as he realized that he was caught, or seen, I should say.
Right.
But Bert tried to pursue him, but he was unable to catch him. Now, Kearney, again, provides the description that we commonly associate with the prowler. He said he was a tall, dressed in dark clothing, had a tight-fitting cap. After the attack, Mrs. Kearney reported suffering from a burning sensation on her lips and throat, which they did, of course, blame on the gas.
And feeling quite parched.
They did suspect robbery as being the main motive of the gasser at the time. The Kearneys had a large sum of money in their house, and someone may have seen them, handling said money.
Then possibly got interrupted and didn't.
But like we said, local papers listed this incorrectly as the first gasser attack, whereas that of the Rafes, I think, was the first attack.
Now, you brought up something there in your story, and again, I think we have to go back in time and consider this. 1944. Air conditioning in houses is not a thing.
Yeah.
So it's very common for the windows to be open, allowing any cool breeze to be able to come through. And, on August, September time frame, it's going to be probably sultry and hot still.
Well, I grew up going to Ohio in the summer times. It's been a time with my grandma, and yeah, you even in that part of the country, you think north for us, but it's pretty hot. Well, and the summers are almost unbearable.
Yeah. And
my grandma lives according to the no air conditioning.
It was a different time.
So you would lay in bed and just sweat
like crazy. I remember I also visited my grandmother who lived in Iowa, actually in northern Iowa, and you would consider very, very cold. But I remember in the upstairs where we would sleep, it was very common. She had every window wide open, the little curtain, laces blowing in the wind at night.
So every smell from outside can come in and every noise can come in.
There was a feed mill literally across the street. And you talk about a sweet smell, that like sweet grain smell would blow through there.
There is a town between here and where my in-laws live where I have stopped 2 times to get gas. And they have a dog feed factory. And I'm going to tell you, that place, that is the worst smelling. Like, we don't go there.
Not a good smell.
We skip that particular exit, man. So, yeah, like, if you got your windows wide open, whatever smell, and if you've got industry, factory, or whatever have you.
Which sounded like was relatively close. Not to mention, crazy wild skunks or whatever, anything, it's going to come through your house. The story spread quickly around the small town of Mattoon, Illinois, making front page news in the town's Gazette newspaper. Now, the title reads, Anesthetic Prowler on Loose, Wife and Daughter First Victims.
The anesthetic part is, that's a little bit of a tongue twister there.
It is.
That's why we call him the Mad Gasser.
The Mad Gasser, it just rolls off the tongue a lot easier. Now, since the town was so small, as I'd mentioned, about 17,000, as chance would have it, about 97% of the population was subscribed and received the newspaper, so they got this warning almost overnight. Many citizens notified the newspaper with their own theories and possible other incidences.
Yeah.
All of this just days after D-Day that occurred in World War II. Now, speculation spread that possibly this was related to an attack of foreign attackers, which only added to the hysteria.
I read somewhere that this story is actually somewhat inspiration for Invasion of the Body Snatchers in a way.
Oh.
Well, the idea of the unknown assailant sneaking up on you in the night. So, and we all know that story was based on the Russian, Red Scare and
yes,
not being able to trust your neighbors and things like that.
Yeah. Speculation spread that possibly this was related to, a foreign attack, but even the newspaper fueled the fire. Imagine that. Admittingly, saying that a escaped Nazi was from a prison camp, somehow, I guess, that had escaped in the nearby area. Possibly they were using gas attacks on United States soil because it was becoming known that, the Nazis were using gas overseas. It really wasn't that big of a jump of an assumption to make with the time frame of living in a world war. To add salt to an existing wound, not only the escaped Nazi of the area had already increased, but vandalism in particular, home break-ins, had increased in the past months. All of this added to a whirlwind of emotional panic. And, of course, this was all responded to by the local Gazette newspaper, in several articles giving the name to the faceless attacker as our beloved Mad Gasser of Mattoon.
So as this all goes on, the first piece of physical evidence, of which there was very little, was found on the night of September 5th. Again, as things were going on, I want to say people were taking to the streets. They were armed. There were people with firearms.
Yep. Kind of vigilante
bats,
groups,
billy clubs, that kind of stuff. They wanted to get this guy, whoever it was.
There was reports that several of them would just divide up and set outside, hidden behind shrubs and stuff with guns. And
on the night of September 5th, Carl and Beulah Cords were returning home around 10 p.m. After being there just for a few minutes, they noticed a piece of white cloth slightly larger than a handkerchief sitting on their porch next to their screen door. Now, Beulah picked it up, and what are you going to do? She smells it. It seems weird.
What do you do when you find that sock in the floor? You pick it up and you smell it.
So she immediately became violently ill and described the effect as being similar to an electric shock. Her face began to swell, and she felt a burning feeling in her mouth and throat. She began to vomit. She started feeling weak and started to experience partial paralysis in her legs.
And you got to think about that. I'm assuming that was found outside, did you say?
Yeah, outside by the screen door.
So if this cloth was dunked or get whatever in whatever gas, that's been out there exposed, airing out, and she gets that kind of sick that quick? Wow.
So they think the cloth may have been left there to knock out the family dog, which usually slept about where they found the cloth. They also found a skeleton key that they described as well used on the sidewalk next to the porch, and a large, nearly empty tube of lipstick.
Again, going back to the possible woman dressed as a man.
I think we'll also find a little bit of transphobia later on in these stories, if you'll bear with me. The cloth was analyzed. No chemicals were found to explain Beulah's reaction. So, was it all in her head? Did she actually do it? Of course, that same night, another incident occurred at the home of Mrs. Leonard Burrell. She reported seeing a stranger break in through a bedroom window and attempt to gas her. And then Mr. and Mrs. Scott returned to their farm at the edge of Mattoon about the same day and found their house filled with a sweet-smelling gas. So these attacks are happening. There's multiple victims some nights. I don't remember the final victim count. I know there were dozens of people. I want to say 30, 40-something people that felt they had been, quote-unquote, attacked by the Mad Gasser.
Well, and we'll get into it, but yeah, I think a lot of it propelled, and there was speculated attacks, and he was at my neighbor's, so I think he came to my house.
If you saw a shadow outside of the window, you just assumed it was the Mad Gasser. It might have been some dude trying to peek in on you, getting ready for the shower or whatever, Yeah. So a lot of these, in any weird smell, I guess at one point in time, the police chief was like, look, I'm tired of getting woke up in the middle of the night because of every weird smell and sound in town.
Yeah,
So,
the police department, they were just hammered. You mentioned one of the physical items they found was a well-worn skeleton key. Now, maybe I missed something, but I didn't find any signs of, while it was speculated early, burglary, theft. How many times do you think the person went actually in the house? Because several of them said there was a small slit in the screen, like where maybe he would have fed in a tube or something for gas. Did you come across something like that?
I never found any evidence that he was motivated by burglary. In any of the readings I found, it doesn't say anything about anything being stolen, anything being taken. No one is actually physically attacked. It is simply gassing of the home.
So it wasn't that, Mrs. Rafe or whatever wakes up and there's a man standing at the edge of the bed and holds her down and puts a cloth over her mouth.
There's only a couple of stories where the intruder actually comes in. Most of the time, he's outside the house.
Because I hadn't come across the skeleton key aspect.
Well, and again, in that time, if you don't know what a skeleton key is, it's kind of an outdated concept, but it's a key that basically works for multiple locks. And a lot of houses had similar locks back in those days. So it wasn't like everybody had their own unique keyed front door. And, you just kind of, they were all very similar. And the keyhole, you're familiar with the keyhole underneath the doorknob. So. But yeah, no, I've never, in all my readings, I have never heard that he stole anything. I've never heard that he physically attacked anyone. Rarely does he even go in the home. And on the rare cases where someone was reported in the home, maybe it wasn't, the actual Mad Gasser, but someone else. So
interesting.
Yeah. So like you said, you got the skeleton key, which you would think he'd be using to break in. But so the public, of course, very concerned. And eventually the FBI became involved. In the middle of all this, the police issue a statement asking residents to avoid lingering in residential areas, and warning groups set up to catch the gasser should be disbanded for public safety. Citizens were warned to exercise restraint when carrying firearms.
Well, and that kind of leads to another theory and speculation later on that, small community, houses pretty close to one another, and if you see some commotion going on at your neighbors and you're the busybody neighbor, you might come over and leave footprints looking in, trying to find out what exactly happened.
Like you said, now the tears in the window screens, that's a little different. But footprints, anybody, hey, I saw somebody over there, I'm going to go check.
Because another record I actually found, a gentleman thought, he saw something from outside through a window and he hadn't yet went to bed. So he got up and I guess literally looked out the window and face to face with the assailant, whatever you want to call him, and said, "It's a woman dressed as a man," and she immediately ran off. And they found what was described as lady-sized footprints. I'm not sure what that means.
Before that, by September 12th, local police had received so many false alarms that they actually reduced the priority of the Mad Gasser investigation and eventually announced the entire incident was likely the result of explainable occurrences, which we've already covered. Now, after that announcement, Gasser reports declined, with the last Gasser report taking place on September 13th at the home of Bertha Bench and her son Orville, which is the story you just talked about, where the described attacker was a woman in men's clothing.
Mm-hmm.
And said this attacker sprayed gas into the bedroom window, and when they went out to investigate, they found footprints that would have been made by a woman's high-heeled shoe.
Okay, wearing high heels while we're doing this on top of everything.
So really, are you going to run around the neighborhood house to house wearing high heels, gassing people?
Yeah, that sounds absurd. Now, I'm going to go back to a couple things to kind of show this mass hysteria and how it's taking effect at this small town. The newspaper, of course, let's face it, newspapers are there to make money. And they're fueling the fire from the first attacks. They're adding, it might be this escaped Nazi prisoner, and it might be related to gassing, like what's going on in World War II. And, they're alluding to all this stuff, fueling that fire. More and more people are calling in, flooding the police department with all kinds of calls. It was almost like they were coaxing the families into believing. Now, some of the families even came back that were supposedly attacked. Again, that's not really the proper word, but involved.
Harassed.
They said they felt the Mad Gasser came back and visited them possibly a second time. Now, later on, some of the reporters of the newspaper said, we kind of went out and almost fueled that. Now, Bill, you said, this person came out here. Is it possible that they came back. Well, yeah, there was footprints outside my window. I didn't know. I bet they did. And so they were really just, egging this on.
I did find something that referenced, like the false memory recovery and whatnot, where you suggest, well, yeah, did he come back? Oh, well, yeah. Now that you mentioned it, I think he could have.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, authorities chalked this all up to mass hysteria.
Well, on September 7th, again, this I thought was hilarious in a sad way, but still hilarious. September 7th, front page news in the Little Gazette newspaper about the Mad Gasser. And guess what? Absolutely nothing occurred. But it still made front page news. The headline read, Mattoon's Mad Gasser took a break from his maniacal forays Thursday night. Terrified citizens inclined to hold their breath and wonder when and where he might strike next.
So the whole point of the headline was to say he didn't do anything.
He didn't do anything, but he still made front page news.
We talk about, in modern day, you say it's all for the clicks, but back then, you wanted to sell a few more papers.
All about the bucks.
Somebody might grab an extra paper because it's talking about the Mad Gasser.
Now, you had mentioned, the police chief going back and they're saying, this is mad, just hysteria. Yeah. You need to stop. Before that, 10 officials had been assigned to the case. Again, small town, 10 people.
They brought in the FBI.
Yeah, FBI, Highway Patrol. Heck, at one point, the Army's chemical warfare team even got involved trying to determine exactly what type of gas the Mad Gasser could be using.
It was a very long name, was the gas that they tetra something. I don't remember the whole name. They said it would have been available in the diesel plant. But then when they went to the diesel plant, they said that they kept such a small amount on hand that there's no way someone could have taken it and used it for all the attacks and noticed.
And nobody noticed. So now I did also find some sick humor, twisted humor, because Bill, you know me and I'm kind of twisted. But as you said, the police station by September 12th, Mattoon, Illinois, reported just totally overwhelmed, false reports, just clouding the investigations. They cut back the case. The priority was lowered. They stripped off the 10 people they'd assigned down to a couple. And the following day, the police chief, C.E. Cole, goes on the local radio station and released another, I think, very bold statement, even for the day and the time. And it says, the entire incident was likely, as you stated, a result of explainable occurrences exacerbated by public fears, and I love this part, and a sign of women while local men are away at work.
I did see that there were some misogynistic overtones to some things. Yeah. These crazy women making things up.
Crazy women. They're all just making it up.
So almost 2 weeks after the attacks began, Commissioner of Public Health Thomas V. Wright comes out, and he announces that while there had undoubtedly been some number of gassing attacks in his opinion, most instances were due to hysteria. After hearing of the alarming events, people then panicked when confronted with the strange or unusual. If there was a strange odor or a shadow at their window, they just assumed it was the gasser. And he said there was no doubt that the gasser existed and had made a number of attacks, but it was nothing more than mass hysteria. And he even later on would go on to even change that entirely to say he believed that there was no Mad Gasser at all.
Yes.
This was all made up.
Well, you mentioned your incident there when they were coming out basically saying this was all a bunch of hoopla. I found many years later the Illinois Crime Bureau and the Illinois University professor, a psychologist by the name of D.M. Johnson, reopened the case and closely examined each and every reported case. Now, again, the reported cases, there were at least 25 that's considered legit, if you will, and then probably another 100 that was, speculated, whatever. They also found there was never real gas used in the attacks at all, as well as no real signs of a prowler even existing. However, the report did outline the effects on the victims were very real, but classic and inline symptoms of the definition of mass hysteria in the field of psychology, which could also include the nausea, the vomiting, even the paralyzation. I guess all of this could be contributed to that.
Your mind can trick your body into doing some pretty... My wife got the flu one time, and I just knew I was going to get the flu.
Right.
And I felt miserable for a couple of days.
Well,
now, I don't think I had the flu. I think my mind was just so wrapped up in the idea of it.
Well, the mind is a powerful thing. I mean...
Now, there's at least one depiction of the gasser out there, which is a black and white drawing. I think is very common if you do a search for it. This is from Lauren Coleman's Mysterious America, that depicts the gasser as a not quite human, possible extraterrestrial. Now,
I like this crazy curve.
Was the gasser an alien? I don't believe that. Now, let's jump up to the year 2003, shall we?
Okay.
We may have identified the Mad Gasser of Mattoon.
And it was an ET.
No, it was not an alien. In a book published in 2003 by Scott Maruna, who I believe is a school teacher in Mattoon now, he may have ID'd the gasser. He might have been the quote-unquote town genius Farley Llewellyn. Now, Farley was a chemistry student and an outcast who drank too much and kept a secret lab. Now, we know he conducted experiments in his lab because he actually had such a violent explosion one day in his lab that it basically woke up the entire town. And this is prior to the gasser sightings.
Oh, wow.
Now, he was known to have experimented with various chemicals, and Maruna wrote, quote, "In a fit brought on by mental instability and years of pent-up rage against a town that would not and could not accept him, Farley tinkered and toyed with various organic solvents in an attempt to create a suitable weapon."
Now, okay. Now, if he blew up his lab, essentially, and it shook the neighbor's windows or whatever,
Yeah.
wouldn't you think the police originally with the 10-person, staff assigned, don't you think that would have been a suspect that would have got brought up?
But the idea at the time, when we use the term town genius, I mean, you could just as easily say village idiot, I think is the thought.
Yeah.
They may not have described him with having the mental capacity of doing
Might not
this.
have been able
Now,
to.
mind you, of course, he's tinkering around with chemicals and whatnot in his basement or whatever. But yeah, they
What could possibly go wrong?
they call him, like I have here, quote, town genius, but I think it would be just as likely they would have called him the village idiot too.
Right. Okay.
And him being an alcoholic,
And mixing alcohol with all.
a lot of people may have said that he wasn't that guy, but I guess people at the time said he was kind of a weird dude and would lurk around people's houses. He was very socially unskilled, let's say, and it's just kind of the weird guy in town that people just didn't really give much thought to.
Well, I think most, at least small towns, know of at least, one type of person.
I referenced
like that.
going to my grandma's house. There was a guy who walked around town, and we were told not to talk to him because he had just no sense of social boundaries. And I guess if you talked to him one time, he thought that was free reign to come into your house and drop by anytime he wanted.
I'm family now.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, just some people don't have that mental capacity, and it may be with him, they didn't think to look at him because they just didn't think he was capable.
I guess I could see that. He's innocent. He's, he's just a little touched in the head or whatever. But yeah, he wouldn't be capable of doing
Yeah,
any
like
of
I said,
that.
locals at the time said he was definitely the kind to creep outside a window, so.
But they allowed the parents, apparently, or somebody allowed him to have a mad lab in the basement. Okay.
So, was there a weird visitor? Or was it all mass hysteria? I don't know. I would say I kind of agree with the original. Like, there were probably some attacks, if that's the word you want to use, but I would say they probably all weren't. Not all of them, but I don't know.
I think probably the most common accepted was, the whole mass hysteria thing.
Yeah.
But, we touched on a couple things just in our little research. The war plant that made the diesel engines or whatever. I mean, that does stand to reason. There was some studies done on that, and just, not saying anything was stolen from the plant and someone used it, but just like we were talking about with the open windows and carrying those fumes, when a person is in bed asleep, especially, you're inhaling a lot, you're not up and moving. So maybe it would stand to reason that if you're inhaling that gas, it would have a pretty dramatic effect. But then when you get up and move around within 30 minutes, you kind of shake it off, you know.
And, environmental regulations weren't the same.
Oh, nowhere near.
Back then.
Yeah.
I mean, heck, you can look at modern day disaster like what's happening in Palestine, Ohio.
Oh, yes.
And those people are being told it's safe to go back home. And yet I saw a video of a reporter throwing a rock in a stream, and the stream looked completely normal, right? She chucks this rock in the stream, and it looked like oil bubbling up, popping on, that mirror sheen. So obviously there's still things going on.
I'm sure you've probably seen, and probably our listeners have maybe seen some of that. I don't know if it's NASA or satellite pictures.
Oh, that black cloud.
Yeah, you can see it from space. I mean, that's big.
Yeah, that's with modern day, safety precautions and whatnot.
Yeah.
But, back in those days, there were lots of chemicals. The ladies that painted the glowing watch hands with the radioactive paint, and then they would put it in their mouths.
Yep.
Like, we had no idea what some of the stuff we were messing with
Going
was.
way back when, what was it, the nightmare clocks or whatever, something like that the people would make these crazy clocks, but the chemicals that they used was known to kill you slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah, where do I sign up? Hey, we've got some openings at work. You can come on in and take a job.
It's not too hard to believe that some kind of powerful gas or something might come out of that diesel factory and waft over to the town.
I think that's my belief. I think it would be something more along those lines. And then possibly let's add the town genius /
Farley Llewellyn,
village idiot, maybe wandering around peeking in people's houses, or maybe a couple other creepers
could have been a combination
around.
of the two. Yeah, like maybe he wasn't going around doing it, but him peeking in somebody's window at the same time the diesel fumes are coming out. Who knows?
Maybe we had some nosy neighbors, not like those ever existed in any time frame. They had to come over and see what was going on and maybe look in your windows too.
Is it time for headlines? So as we sit here today and record, we are 1 week away from the Super Bowl. And if you follow the Super Bowl, you know that the Kansas City Chiefs won this year. I believe they had a historic season. I don't follow football much, but I believe it was the fifth year in a row that they had gone to the finals game in their division, which in itself is history making.
Yeah, that's amazing. And they actually made the next plateau.
Yeah. And it's twice in recent history that the Chiefs have won. So, I'm not a big football guy, but I'll say, hey, it's the
go
home team.
Kansas City Chiefs.
Now, the other part of Super Bowl weekend for me was, of course, watching the potential alien invasion unfold.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the Super Bowl commercials.
No, I don't really care about Super Bowl commercials.
Okay.
Although the Breaking Bad one I thought was hilarious. But no, we could talk about commercials when we're not recording. But no, my son and I were so fascinated with this potential alien invasion. We didn't believe it was happening.
Down UFOs.
But we were so fascinated. So normally I have one headline from one source, but this is from multiple sources this time around because I want to talk about it. Now, obviously, the first event we're going to talk about is our government shot down a Chinese spy balloon the week before the Super Bowl off the coast of South Carolina. Now, of course, they allowed it to drift all the way across the whole dang country.
Yeah. They were just doing some weather checks. I mean, if you ask.
Oh, no, the Chinese are like, no, it was totally innocuous. We weren't doing anything terrible.
Some school student made it and sent it up. Yeah.
Now, we shot it down off the coast of Carolina because I believe the idea was not to shoot it down over a potentially populated location.
So they waited till
the thing was huge, didn't they say? It was like gigantic.
Yeah, at first when I read it, it's like, oh, it was, a small helium balloon inflated to a beach ball.
It was like the size of a small building or something.
Yeah, this thing was huge.
So they didn't want to shoot it down over a populated area in case they hurt somebody. So I'll let it slide. But apparently there were quite a few strategic locations that it flew over. And we don't know just exactly what they were collecting. I think we sent a salvage team to recover the remains and all that. But so Friday, February 10th of Super Bowl weekend, the U.S. military shot down a UFO in Alaskan airspace off the coast of Alaska. Now, this object was smaller than the Chinese balloon, roughly the size of a small car, and was taken down by an F-22. Now, the pilots did say the object appeared unmanned and did not resemble an aircraft at all. And some of the pilots said it interfered with the sensors in their aircraft.
Ooh.
So it had no identifiable propulsion system, which would lead some to believe it was a balloon. But again, when it comes to our government, I'm the kind of guy who doesn't trust everything they say.
Yeah.
They shot down a UFO off the coast of Alaska
by definition.
Friday.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unidentified flying object.
And that
definition.
That is the conversation I've had with multiple people when they're like, oh, they said it was a balloon. No, they did not identify it properly. So by definition, it's a UFO.
Correct.
So you're thinking, okay, that's weird enough, right? Saturday, the very next day, the U.S. military shoots down an object in Canadian airspace.
So we got North Carolina, we got Alaska.
Well, hey, North Carolina, but that's the Chinese spy balloon. Now, the UFO is Alaska and then Canada. And this is announced by Prime Minister Trudeau on Facebook or Twitter or whatever his. But he announces that, like, with the help of U.S. forces, we have shot down a UFO again by an F-22. This one was reported to be cylindrical in shape and said to be similar to the object shot down over Alaska. So now you have American military aircraft over Canada.
The same one that also said to affect radar instruments and communication, possibly.
Later that same day, that night, they shut down the airspace over Montana.
What?
And supposedly keep it shut down all night until eventually lifting the restriction in the morning. And of course, now no one really, there was no announcement, but NORAD did say they were tracking an unidentified object.
So we close and turn off the lights and nobody can see what's going on.
So Sunday,
it is odd that it flies over those areas.
Yeah. Sunday, they shoot another UFO down over Lake Huron. This is the fourth flying object to be shot down in a week. The third, which is unidentified. Now, this one's shot down by an F-16, which uses a Sidewinder missile, which, by the way, Sidewinder missiles cost about $400,000 each. It needed 2 of them. The first one they lost. It did not hit the target, and they don't know why.
Maybe some type of jamming device.
You're talking, almost $1 million to shoot down this UFO, not counting wages.
So where did that missile go?
Yeah, that they don't know. They lost the missile.
Yeah.
So this one was described as octagonal in shape, like a stop sign, with strings hanging off the bottom of it. Now, officials believe this was the same object that had been detected over Montana, and the government will only officially identify the Chinese spy balloon. That's the only one they'll say, okay, we know what this was. We don't know what the others are. Now, they're claimed to likely not be alien in origin. Likely. That's what they're saying.
I'm totally envisioning this cartoon strip on another planet where some teenage aliens are at a parade and their hot air balloons fly into space. And they're like, look what Earth did to our balloons, Mom and Dad.
So the government is saying they're likely not alien, but it's not ruling out the possibility. I guess there was a conference held with some senators this week, and one of the senators came out saying, I have more questions now than I did when I walked in.
Yeah, this is big stuff. And this is legitimate stuff.
I think the Speaker of the House guy, after he had a meeting talking about these objects, he's like, look, we don't really know what's going on, but I would just suggest you lock your doors tonight. Come on.
That's going to help?
Well, yeah, if the aliens are traveling hundreds of millions of light years to visit us, locking the door is going to stop them. Hey, it worked in Signs, though. They did trap one in a pantry. They trapped one in a pantry.
In a pantry.
I just watched Signs not that long ago with my daughter. And I even thought about, there's a scene in Signs where the guy goes to sign up for the military, and he goes, you know what I'd do? If I was going to invade another planet. So I'd send a small scout team first. I'm like, holy moly. So, of course, me being me, I spent all of Super Bowl weekend not excited that the Chiefs were going to go to the Super Bowl. And I was worried about the potential alien invasion and wondering, do I have enough
another
food
UFO?
Ready? Yeah, do I have enough food ready? What are they going to do? I mean, it was crazy. It was a crazy weekend, but there were 3 unidentified objects that our government will not tell us what they were. I don't think our government knows, to be honest. But
well, and in all honesty, I love this stuff. I'm not always a firm believer in it, but this is factual stuff. But
this happened. It's documented.
People are also asking, whenever something usually surfaces that everybody's pointing fingers at, look at this, it's what else is going on in the background.
Now, do you know that this week they were supposed to release the list of those people who had traveled to Epstein Island?
Well, there's that. Then you had, of course, the whole thing that we talked about in East Palestine, Ohio.
Yeah. Oh, that's a horrible disaster.
So, yeah.
Why are they distracting us?
Sleight of hands.
You got the Super Bowl going on. You got the potential alien invasion.
And not like what they've got playing on the Grand Theater for us to watch isn't crazy and real enough. It's like, holy crapola on a cracker.
And I'm with you. When something like this happens, is it to misdirect us? Or the other thing, is it to to prep us for a potential revelation? Okay, these were alien objects. Now, the widely accepted explanation that I've heard is, number one, these were probably either civilian or commercial items, weather balloon type things.
Nobody's second credit.
And they were shot down because in most cases, I think the 3 unidentified ones were actually in civilian airspace, and so posed a risk to civilian air travel.
Makes sense.
So, but for a brief shining moment on Super Bowl weekend, I thought, boy, the aliens are coming.
Well, we're kind of flipping this into a UFO conspiracy, so I'm going to...
Well, we did describe the Mad Gasser as possibly aliens, so that's my justification.
There's a connection. I'm going to shift my headliner to an article I found in Energy News, and it has to do with the Nord Stream gas leaks and why Europe suspects gross sabotage. Now, this was published actually back in October of 2022, so not all that long ago. But what happened? Well, on September 26th, a flurry of detonations on 2 underwater pipelines connecting Russia to Germany sent gas spewing to the surface of the Baltic Sea.
I read about this.
The explosions triggered 4 gas leaks at 4 locations, 2 in Denmark's exclusive economic zone and 2 in Sweden's exclusive economic zones. The magnitude of those explosions was measured at a 2.3 and a 2.1 on the Richter scale. Respectively, Swedish and Danish authorities said, and likely correspond to an explosive load of several hundred kilos. Now, neither the Nord Stream pipelines was transporting gas at the time of the blast, although they both contain pressurized methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Remarkably, the signature of the gas bubbling at the surface of the Baltic Sea could be seen from space, just like what we talked about in Palestine, Ohio. Now, 2 subsea pipelines connecting Russia to Germany are at the center of the international intrigue after a series of these blasts caused what might be the single largest release of methane in history, and many suspect it was a result of an attack. In initial crime scene investigations occurring mid-September into what caused the gas leaks on the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines reinforced the suspicions of gross sabotage. As investigations continue, many in Europe suspect the incident was a result of an attack, particularly as it occurred during a bitter energy standoff between European Union and Russia. The timing is right. Or was it they're just not maintaining their crap and things are going awry?
Well, and methane is not a gas you want leaking out into the air.
Yeah, yeah. Not that you want any gas, but methane is a really bad one. Now, the Kremlin has repeatedly dismissed claims, it destroyed the pipelines, calling such allegations as stupid, absurd, and claiming that the U.S. that had the most to gain from the gas leaks, so the fingers flipping, pointing here.
You got to think, man, you thought we were out of the Cold War. And I know they're engaged in an active war with Ukraine, but really, it seems like we're getting back to those old Cold War.
Yeah, it is. It's
standards.
Flashbacks. Now, of course, the White House has denied any involvement in the suspected attack as well. So there's that.
So Eric normally closes these out, but I do want to just, keep your windows closed. Don't let the gasser be sneaking up and gassing you in your sleep.
Turn your air conditioner on. Use that power. We hope you've enjoyed yet another installment of Nightmares on the Lost Highway. Thanks for listening, folks. Would like to give a shout out to our first paying sponsor, Raven's Loft. That's our family shop here located in Lebanon, Missouri. It's your one-stop gaming, vintage toy, and collectible shop where you can find Star Wars, Transformers, G.I. Joe, comics, vinyl records, role-play gaming, Magic the Gathering, and so much more. We're located here at 223 West Commercial, downtown Lebanon, and also in our second location, also here in Lebanon at the Heartland Antique Mall. We'd like to thank Raven's Loft for again supporting Nightmares on the Lost Highway.
I want to take a time to thank the people that helped bring this all together. Alex Tudor, you can almost call him our producer at this point. Sarah Tudor, who also helps with some of the technical stuff. I want to take a moment to extend thanks to Eric for letting us use his space to record in, kind of our makeshift studio.
I, in turn, would like to thank Bill for, one, putting up with me and using this camaraderie to do something we both very much love and enjoy doing, and thank Bill's family for allowing him to spend all the time to work and clean up our recordings and present them in what you hear in the final terms, the final edition, if you will.
And I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to listen. I know we've got some loyal followers out there. We do this as a labor of love, but we're happy that there are people that enjoy it hopefully as much as we do.
Thank you very much.